She already went through it.
All right. I think we should go ahead and get started because we have a full agenda. Aaron, do you want to go through the slides or you want me to?
Yeah, you can go ahead and kick it off.
All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to most of us who are remote and those who are also present in Brisbane. Hopefully you're enjoying yourselves. You are in the SCIM working group session. Just to make sure you're in the right room. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the note well, so I will just leave it to you to read our rules of engagement, if you will. On to the next slide. Just a quick recap of the code of conduct. I don't think it's been an issue in this room, but just be respectful of everybody. Keep the discussions on topic and not take it to a personal level. And we are always looking for volunteers, so be prepared to contribute in all of the work items we have. All right. So thank you to Peter and Paul for taking taking notes. If somebody can help watch the Zulip, see if there's any other comments. I'll try and do the same thing as well. And I forgot to update the meeting material since I copied it from RATS. But hopefully you can find the SCIM ones instead of RATS. It should say SCIM. Let's do the quick agenda bash. Next slide, please. So when we made the agenda, we didn't quite do the math correctly. So Elliot, since you were the last to speak, we were 5 minutes over. So rather than giving you 15 minutes, we gave you 10. Wanted to see if that was going to cause any issues.
We have, I think, one major issue to discuss. So, Mike, I can't say that we'll stick to 10, but it should be close.
Okay. Well, I will try and do the chair's update as quickly as I can to give you as much time back as possible. If there are others who don't need as much time, also please speak up. Otherwise,
yeah. I don't think we're going to need full 10 minutes on SCIM events, but I could be wrong. And Phil can disagree with me.
I don't.
Same for Delta Query.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I will definitely try and keep everybody on time then, if not a minute or two shorter, to give Elliot time back. Any other comments, feedback on the agenda? If not, then let me just do a quick update on the cursor pagination. So I am in the process of doing the Shepherd write-up. I am still looking for feedback. Danny, I don't know if you're in the call. Anjali, thank you for your response. I'm looking to make sure and get confirmation to see if there are any IPR statements. Also, to everybody who's participating, I'm also looking to see what implementations may be out there or are planned to be based on this draft. And then lastly, I did a review. So Anjali and Danny, please come back to me if you have any questions on the comments that I provided. I'll try and reach out to make sure, because I didn't see any responses from the early reviews. I think from Barry, I forget the other two reviewers. So Anjali and Danny, I don't know if you've gotten the thumbs up on whether their comments were addressed to their satisfaction.
So is there something we need to take up as next steps on those, or reach
Yes,
out to
so
them?
I did provide more comments that I'd like feedback on. There were some editorial nits. There are some clarifications I think you should make in the security considerations. So I think I'd like to see another revision.
Okay.
And I'd like to make sure that the comments from the previous reviewers were also addressed, and that they're okay with the newer drafts.
Okay, so
Yeah,
for-
Aaron may be able to provide us some more advice here, but we felt like we had addressed all of the previous comments, Nancy, and we thought we had followed Aaron's advice about requesting their re-review and confirmation.
Okay, I didn't see any confirmations, which is what I was looking for.
Yeah, it's entirely possible we just didn't do the right things to request their confirmation. So maybe you could give us some advice about how to request their re-review and confirmation.
Usually it's just a question of reaching out to them. And you can either CC the chairs, since some of them were through the directorates. The other thing is I can reach out to them as well, Paul. So I will do that, but again, I gave comments. I don't know if it's just me, I'm hearing some feedback. Okay, so I gave comments a few days ago for which I'd like to see some of them responded to. And then we can move forward. So I think in the interest of time, okay, I see Danny's commenting that he'll respond to my comments as well. So that would be good. So the working group last call did complete. I'm working on it. I just want to make sure that all of the feedback is on the positive side from those that provided comments. And then I'll move forward with the Shepherd write-up. Quick question, Roman. So congratulations on you becoming the IETF chair. Who will be our new AD?
Ready to announce? Yeah, it's going to be Deb.
All right. Congratulations, Deb.
Yay. Sorry, that was a 3:30 in the morning. Yay. I'll do better next time.
I was like, oh my goodness, how should I take that? All right. So I'll let you know, Deb, once I'm done with the Shepherd write-up,
Perfect.
and we'll update that as well. All right. So 1 minute to spare. So with that, we can move forward then to the use cases. So Pam, are you there?
I am here.
All right. Do you have any slides? I don't remember seeing any.
I do have slides. I didn't upload them. I can also just talk to them if that's easier, given we don't have that much time. Would you prefer that?
Go ahead and share them, and then you can upload them afterwards. It would be good to have them on.
Yep, can do. Do I need to be made a presenter? I don't think so, right?
No, I think you can just take, and we can give you, let me see.
I just made you slides and give you slide control.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks,
perfect.
Aaron.
Hey, everybody. How jet lagged is everyone?
Not at all, except it's midnight here.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I don't see a way to get my slides in here. I'm just going to talk to it if that's okay for everyone.
Okay, can you just please upload them later?
I will upload them. I
Okay.
would love to have people look through them anyway.
Okay.
But here's the latest update on the use cases. So Paolo and I have had many in-depth debates about how we continue forward. And I think we have actually a pretty good set of plans now. The way that this draft has evolved, and as you all know, it's a long-suffering draft. We've been doing it for a long time. But what we've got now is we have a set of use cases, essentially 5 use cases that we think exercise all of the different core specifications in RC 76, 43, and 44, and also the new drafts, including the Delta, the dynamic query draft and cursor pagination draft, as well as the events draft. So our goal with this, when you take a look at the slides, what we are really trying to do is define, the core specifications defines, the SCIM actions that are HTTP verbs and triggers, and of course the endpoints and schema. Those are the 4 things. What we are trying to do is put those 4 sets of things into a greater context of how they get used over time, over and over again. And part of that is that we think that's important for dynamic query as an example, because dynamic query is essentially a composite pattern of SCIM actions. So, I think, Paolo, I don't know if Paolo's on the line. He may or may not be on the line. But I think what we can have is a working use case.
I'm here.
Hey, Paolo. Anything else you want to say about where we are?
No, I think it will be important if we can get some feedback, right, on the use case, especially on how they are being organized, right? And I think it's even more important if we are missing something. And don't think about what is implemented today, right? The idea is that since we are starting again from scratch, we would like for having new use cases that we are already seeing that at some point we need to address, even if we don't have the answer today. I think we need to address them as use cases, as something that the group needs to resolve, right?
Right. So I think we can leave it at that if it's okay for everyone. I know we have a tight schedule. So we will upload the slides. You can take a look at them. You'll see that there's a ton of time-based mapping and also a bunch of sort of defined use case concepts and maps that may or may be right. And we'd love that feedback.
Pam, have you so I assume this is all documented in the draft Correa SCIM use cases?
It is documented in the draft. We have one to upload now. The use cases themselves have been completely revamped. So that's
Okay.
really the new work, is the last half of that document.
So let us know, let the chairs know when you've uploaded the latest update, and then we can ask for reviewers, because it would be useful for us to adopt something that we can formally use as a working document. Okay?
Okay, perfect. Yep, we'll do that. That's definitely the next step.
Great. Was that it?
Yeah, I think so. It's either this much content or we dive deep into it, and we don't think we have time for that.
Well, especially if you don't have the slides to walk through.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, if needed, we can discuss it in the interims as well, or in the side meetings, I should say.
Also, the other piece, the one use case that we don't know that we have down perfectly well is dynamic query. And so if we give more time to them, then maybe we can ask questions in that session that are going to help us make sure our maps are correct.
Alrighty. Okay, I think with that, then perhaps we should move on. Let's see, Phil and Mike on SCIM events.
Yep, I think Phil is on as well, lurking someplace.
I'm here.
Yeah. So really, we don't have slides. I have one slide, but it's really, I can share it if we'd like. Basically, Phil updated the latest draft to kind of clarify certain things, taking out a section on event delivery feeds, taking out mentions of risk signals, a couple of events that seem like were already covered by CAPE or shared signals frameworks, or outside events outside of SCIM events. So a lot of it, Phil, is it safe to say there was a lot of it was removal of things that people were finding confusing rather than the core of the draft? Silence is agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so the latest draft is 4. It's out there up on GitHub and the right repositories. It just wasn't done. We didn't make the deadline for IETF 119. I'll upload this slide so people have the reference after the call as well.
Draft 4 is actually submitted and online now.
Right. I think that's it, unless someone has more questions.
I just wanted to reflect. I've been talking to some practitioners in the community. They're very, very excited about what you guys have created and eager to see it to reach WGLC.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I had some of the same reactions. I was participating in the shared signals interop at Gartner London a couple weeks ago, and the idea that there was a similar, even if it's not shared signals as a foundation, which it might be, we can talk about that later, but the idea that SCIM events being available as well was attractive to a lot of people as well. Thanks for the feedback, Paul. And I think that's it then, unless there's more feedback and more questions. All right, well, I guess we see time to the chair then. Back. We're flying through the agenda, everybody. Good job.
Hey, Mike, this is Dean Sachs. I'm in the queue.
Yeah, I didn't see it. Go for it.
Quick question. Do you need additional reviewers? I reviewed the last draft. Do you need additional reviews to help move this draft toward working group last call? If so, let me know what you need.
Good question.
Well, I can't speak as a chair because I'm an author here too. So my request to Aaron as the co-chair and the chair for this draft is that I think we could start a working group last call on this draft, because I think we've gotten reviews. We've matured the draft.
Okay, sounds great.
Atul, did you want to say something? See you in the queue.
Yeah, so I guess my question was, before we go to last call, based on what Mike just said, is there anything we want to do as far as the shared signals framework is concerned with the SCIM events draft?
I think there may be I think we might want to hold off on last call just let people have a few more discussions around shared signals and the SCIM events draft. I don't think they're in conflict, but I heard from a couple of people who wanted to give input. So I don't know what the process is for that. Obviously, I don't want to do last call if there's additional things that might need to be updated.
One thing I noticed on that point, I don't see a mention of shared signals in the draft. Is that something you want to add a section on that talks about the relationship between the two?
No, I don't think. I think the draft needs to focus on just defining events, and that was one of the reasons I cut out all the stuff about how to transmit it and stuff. That was mainly there because the group had been idle for so long, and SEC events had picked it up. But now that we're finishing the end, and we've got the last piece was the async event. Because that does sort of go back to another part of SCIM protocol to clarify that. I think the set transfer specs is what it depends on, whereas SSF is about how you manage streams and do something, so it's its own thing. I have a concern that SCIM servers are likely both generators and receivers at the same time. So if you can only register to receive events and you can't register to send, that's a worry. But I don't think that affects this draft. That's something else.
Yeah, I mean the the push delivery and the poll delivery that you refer to in the in the draft, it kind of works the same way, right? Like shared signals uses those same two things. It just defines an additional metadata on top of that, and a way to verify that the stream is alive, and a way to stop pause the stream. So it gives you a little bit more features for managing asynchronous delivery, and that is why I thought it would be interesting to at least refer to, or sort of evaluate whether that's a good transport mechanism for this.
Yeah, I mean my thought is to avoid any notion of protocol in this draft. It's just the event definitions. Keep it clean.
So I think it's me, right?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Next, thank you. So, I mean, you said you took a bunch of stuff out. I see that the picture is gone. And I think what you're saying is that all of the stuff that was in the picture is out of this version now, right? Like, the picture had the concept of essentially aggregators. Like it was much more of a routing type of concept that was in that transmission verbiage. And so all of that's gone. Does that mean you're not expecting the implementers to use it that way, or you just think that they should imagine that on their own?
I don't think how people choose to build their products doesn't affect interoperability. There were a lot of questions early on about how is this going to work?
Right.
And the set transfer specs explain how it's going to work from an interoperable point of view, but I don't think, and the architecture is one possible way to architect, but from a standards perspective, it doesn't seem useful to have it in there because it causes confusion in the sense that people think they have to implement it that way, and that's not what I want to say. I wouldn't want to do that. I think the key interop is set, push, and pull, and after that, that's there's a number of issues. A lot of SCIM services will be implemented as clusters, and set can either help or be set can help you make the cluster work better. That's my view, but it doesn't mean that people have to implement it that way.
Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, I think you're probably right, and I can definitely see that point of view. I guess the only question is, if everyone does it different, is it still interoperable? Would be the question. Like, you do have to agree on how the set gets sent.
That's
so
what
are
the
you
set
concerned about
transfer
that?
specs do. Yeah.
Okay, so that's enough. Just the point to point from your perspective is
Which, and correct me if I'm wrong, Atul, the set transfer specs are kind of fulfilled in shared signals, 8936 and 8935.
Yeah, I mean those provide the transport for the streams that shared signals uses, and I think that referring to just those specs is okay. But if you want interoperability and the robustness of sort of being able to manage the streams, then SSF is a ready framework that you could use. I mean, there might be good reasons why you don't want to do that, but just wanted to propose that as like a possibility that could actually bring the interoperability that Pam is referring to.
great. Thank you for answering the questions. I wasn't sure if I'm not saying there is or isn't a problem, but I was definitely interested in your perspectives. So thank you.
So, Mike, I saw you, or I heard you mention you want to have people have more discussion about the relationship. Do you have anything in particular you're looking for feedback on that you are recommending holding off doing last call for?
I just want to make sure we were clear on that discussion we just had is the primary thing. I don't disagree. I mean, I think I agree with what Phil is saying. As long as it's not in conflict, with something like shared signals, then I think we're fine with it. I think there may be one or two other people who had opinions on that were catching up to the draft that might want input on changes they might want to see in it. I don't know how major those are though.
Do you think those might be things that are acceptable changes to happen during a last call?
I'm not clear enough with the process to know what kind of changes take place at that stage or what couldn't take place at that stage. I also don't really have a clear handle on what those concerns are from some of these third parties. So I can't actually, even if I did, I couldn't tell you yes or no very clearly. My apologies on that.
Okay, I guess in that case, do you have particular people in mind that you could reach out to solicit this feedback, and then we could?
Yes, it's on my list. I can schedule calls. Phil, you and I and a few others can get on the co-authors as well and resolve those pretty quickly. I think I just want to make sure that they're heard before we last call it.
Okay, it sounds like we should wait on doing the last call until we get that feedback, but let's plan on that as the plan of action then. So the last working group last call happens on the mailing list anyway, so we'll just
okay. Yeah, I think we can, in that case, as long as we don't need an official IETF, in-person meeting, then I think we're fine because we can resolve those issues. And then it may be the kind of thing where we move really quickly to last call on the email list once those issues are raised and resolved.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Well, that was a little more involved than I thought, but thanks, y'all.
Great. I don't see anybody else on the queue, so we can
maybe just a quick note taker's request. Aaron and Pam and Atul, if you could just look through the notes there and just make sure I captured that correctly.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, well, we are on track on our agenda now with so let's move on to Delta queries, which I believe we do have slides for. And Anjali, I assume you're presenting this. Do you want to control the slides or do you want me to run the slides for you?
Yeah, can you run the slides for me?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a context from our previous recap from 118, what we have worked on, what the initial draft that we published for. We are working on Delta query, a query that is used to return incremental retrieval of resources that have been created, updated, or modified, created, updated, or deleted. This allows for more efficient interaction between SCIM's client and service provider, and addresses the problems that have inhibited large-scale implementation of use cases such as synchronization and entropy detection. Next slide, please. So after we have published the first version, we received some feedback, and we have also been reviewing internally the draft, and we are specifically working on two aspects, simplifying and optimizing the solution further. One of the aspect is full scans related to. So the initial draft was proposing that the Delta query also be used for doing an initial baseline, and specifically the initial Delta query, the Delta token request to include return of all the resources in current state. And we have been looking at, is it really necessary for Delta query to return all the resources, and can we decouple Delta query and full scans? So the clients can continue to use existing APIs that are there for listing all users and groups, while they use Delta query only to retrieve the changed entities or deleted, created, and modified entities. This simplifies the implementation. The other aspect that we are looking for is the Delta query response structure, how to optimize it. Next slide, please. So from a full scan perspective, a possible flow, so we have not decided on a final solution, but what we are looking at is a possible flow where the SCIM client obtains the first Delta token without doing a full scan. SCIM client calls Delta query without a token. The Delta query responds with the next Delta token, but does not return all the resources as part of the query. Then as a next step, the client completes a full scan, does a baseline in whatever manner they do, either by using list APIs or any other existing mechanisms. And then once that scan is done, they use Delta query again, calling it with the initial token that they received from the first step. There will be some overlaps, like during the period they did, during the period between the server issued them the first Delta token and the time that the SCIM client took to baseline, there might be some adds or removes that might have been already synchronized or reconciled, and they might be returned in the next Delta token, but it is a fair, I would say, trade-off between simplifying the Delta query implementation and versus getting a few records redundant in there. So there's no miss of any records, but the clients may retrieve already reconciled records, which is not a security concern. So the benefits in this approach is that it simplifies the Delta query. SCIM clients can continue to use their existing APIs to do full scan, leveraging their existing implementations, and Delta query is an additional add-on to optimize their existing implementation to either do entropy or to detect any changes for synchronization. Next slide, please. We are also looking at Delta query responses. So in our previous version of the draft, we had proposed to return full resource representation for created or modified resources. However, we are looking into options to further optimize the payload and looking into areas such as returning only modified attributes for modified resources. So for created resources, return everything, all attributes. For deleted resources, just return meta information. but for modified attributes, just return modified attributes only. So with that in mind, we also know that not all SCIM implementers may be keeping track of modified attributes. So we want to make sure that the solution that we come up for response payload caters to both kind of implementers, while it's still effective and interoperable for SCIM clients to work with different implementers and not have to manage two different implementations. So with that in mind, we have put together a few goals so that this drives us while we are defining a solution. So the approach that we come up with is adoptable by SCIM servers, sourcing data from common databases, data sources, efficient at large scale. So we don't want to return unnecessary information if it is not needed. And it is efficient for clients to understand response from server needed to build anti-entropy logic. Some of the challenge definitely in coming up with the response is what is this response schema that caters to all these four types of responses, like returning all attributes for a created resources, return nothing for deleted, and for modified, return modified attributes only. It's easy to handle single value attributes, but with multi-value attributes, the challenges become more. We need a qualifier, additional qualifier to say whether it's modified or it's basically added or removed. So we are looking into that. So at this point in time, these are the two big problems that we are working on, and hopefully in our next revision, we would have a solution for it, and that should be soon. Next slide, please. So if you are interested in this work, please reach out to us through PRs, issues, or either via mailing list, and we can collaborate on it and come up with a solution that works for all. Thank you. Questions?
You have Pam in the queue.
Hello.
Hello.
Can I ask on the full scan slide, I don't know if you want to go back to it or not. I mean, the first step was requesting the token without requesting any actual objects or performing a get. It says on the right that it's more efficient. Why exactly is it more efficient? Like, isn't that an extra hop?
No, so we're not thinking from an efficiency perspective, but it's simplifying the delta query logic and keeping the concerns separated. So in order to do full scans, what does a client need? They need to retrieve all resources that are there with their current state. And SCIM already provides those APIs in the form of get users and get groups. So what we are saying is the SCIM clients can continue to leverage those APIs to retrieve all records to do their initial baseline or reconciliation, and do not have to switch to Delta Query to achieve that. And from Delta Query's perspective, they just need an initial token to represent the time at which they see that they have done a full scan. So doing it before their full scan just covers any records that might have been updated or created or deleted, any modifications that have happened during the full scan itself while the client is doing a full scan and baselining. So that's how it, and it is a guidance for SCIM client implementers, but from a specification perspective, what we are focusing on is Delta Query to be able to return an initial token, and then subsequently, when a token is provided, it will return the modified or created, updated, or deleted entities.
Okay, so what is the actual mechanism then? Are you saying that there's a different endpoint that you're having to fetch that token from? And the reason I ask is I had just assumed that the request for the Delta token would be a query parameter, and therefore wouldn't interrupt the already existing ones.
We haven't finalized the solution, so these are our high-level thoughts and just sharing on those. But with further details, I think we will have to wait till we have this next version of spec out.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? We will at some point need people to review this draft too, by the way.
Yeah.
And Anjali, I presume you'll be doing implementations of this as well as we move this forward.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Elliot.
All right. You've got my slides, right, Nancy?
Yes, Aaron is sharing them.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right. Hi, everybody. So this is an update to draft IETF SCIM device model. We recently posted an update to this. And I'll talk a little bit about the changes. We're on -03. And there will be a -04. We know this already. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to recap, this is really a reversal of the normal SCIM flow, where instead of enterprises going out, partners come in. And the partner, by the way, might be like an app or might be direct connectivity, but it's still all SCIM operations. The module is modular, so you can add what you want to add. I'm going to talk more about just how modular in a moment because we've learned some stuff. There are some new models that we've been pondering. One of them has actually been added. And actually, a couple have been added, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. This is relevant when we're talking about non-IP devices to draft Brinkman NIPSI, which was presented in ASDF and is being discussed there. Because it allows for provisioning and control of non-IoT devices. Next slide, please. Okay, so a couple of changes from IETF 118. First of all, as threatened, I've worked with Jeff Cooper, and we've actually not only have we inserted the FDO model, but we've in the draft we've actually implemented it in the open source. And we did this also with the Ethernet MAB draft because it seems like they go together well. And so Ethernet MAB is just a very crude, and even in the draft it says, I think I might use the term pseudo authentication, but it is what a lot of IoT people still use. It's not pretty. It's sort of the bare minimum, but it allows for bootstrapping of stronger trust. We added an IANA consideration section. That having been said, anybody who's been following the mailing list over the last, I don't know, half hour, will note that Monty came back. Monty and I have been having a pretty good back and forth about how to improve that IANA consideration section. And I'd like to, we need to cover that in extensions. There were a lot of editorials. Just, we have a document that was written by a non-English speaker. He's actually pretty good in his English, but there were a couple of areas where I think the language did need to be smoothed and actually still needs to be smooth. But I've got editor eyes at this point, meaning I've looked at it too long that I'm seeing right through some of the issues. So I need help in that regard. Next slide. So one of the things we noticed when implementing FDO was that we were provisioning two types of things with this draft. The first was provisioning a mechanism for the device not only to provide for an ownership transfer process, but also, and that is really about provisioning the device a little bit more than we had anticipated with SCIM. And this might go to some of Danny's comments from 117. But we were also doing a network provisioning operation in terms of provisioning the network. So these actually, so for instance, an FDO provisioning might lead to, various device operations that makes a device look and feel like it's supposed to look after FDO provisioning occurs. Whereas most of the models that we have deployed and implemented look a lot more like just getting the thing on the network. So these are slightly two slightly different things, but they work very well complementary with SCIM extensions. Next slide, please. All right, so there are a couple of big issues remaining, and it's been pointed out to me that there are actually more than there are on this slide. So we had a request in 117 to handle non-IoT device provisioning. If people are interested, I'm going to say that the clock is running at this point because we've been waiting for a real proposal for that for now 6 months, and it's really time to move on. I want to talk a bit about versioning, and this gets to another point that Monty went. We should take the two of these, perhaps, versioning and extensibility together. Initially, Hassan put out a versioning approach which had separate numeric versioning. I'm actually wondering if that's too complex, and that really what we should have in terms of extensibility is either you're implementing the current, if you will, extension, or you're implementing another extension, just give it another name. And that actually simplifies versioning in one way or another, but we really need some input on that. Also, if we want to do other models, probably now is the time. There are a couple that I think we've been discussing, one of which is TCG, which Monty has mentioned. Another of which that I've been pondering is RFC 8995 vouchers, which is something that would be easy enough, but there's an interesting aspect here, which is we shouldn't just throw things in willy-nilly unless we understand the coding implications in terms of what's going to happen on the SCIM server side. So for instance, if we're talking about Anima, what does it mean to pass a voucher to an Anima SCIM server? It would mean that we would be shortening a transaction, probably using a pinned voucher, in which you don't. What it would mean is that you wouldn't have to have a synchronous communication to the server as 8995 defines it, the MASA server. So that's something, Michael Richardson, you might be interested in pondering at least. There were a couple of other things that I think are also not on this slide that we need to cover. In terms of Paolo's work with PAM, we probably could stand a terminology shakedown, and would really like to see any changes that people think are important there. I also think it's probably a good idea to kick off an early review for security. Anytime we're talking about anything in SCIM, that's probably a good idea. And yeah, those are the sorts of things that I think we need to do. So immediately after this meeting or shortly thereafter, at least, I'll be getting with Monty to try and sort those middle two bullets. Danny and friends, if you really have anything you want to do with non-IoT device provisioning, can I ask you to sort of move on with that? And then we should talk about additional models. Next slide, please. Okay, so I covered a bunch of these. The only other thing is what I'm hoping to do from a timing perspective is get all of these issues resolved. And there are a couple of small issues in the issue tracker there that have to be addressed in the next month or so that the draft is stable enough to get to last call in May. So that is my hope. And that's it. Comments, questions?
Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, I feel like I'm the only one saying anything. I hope I'm not, dominating too much. I apologize if I am. But I do have, two comments. One is we definitely would love to collaborate with you on the terminology shakedown. I think that would be amazing. The second one is kind of just a technical note. If you like RFC, well, I think it's 7644 defines /users and /groups as the REST endpoint. And this one is /device. And that gives me heartburn, just the plurality of it not matching /users. So if you're going to do a list on /devices, you've probably heard this before, right?
Okay, that's actually, Pam, that's easily fixed. I have no problem with that.
Okay. Thank you. That's perfect.
Let me tell you, if that were the biggest comment of the concern of the draft, it's not my biggest concern. But it's easily fixed, and I'm happy to correct it.
Okay, great. Thank you. The second one, actually Monty's in line. I'll put my hand up again.
No, go ahead. Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought we'd meet in person. It sounds like we've come to an agreement over the list. So yeah, I'm not sure how you want to handle this. If you and I meet, or if you have a regular phone call. But so basically, it sounds like you and I are in agreement already on how to proceed with this. We just have to find out how to do it.
Yeah, I expect that it should take probably like a phone call, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, well, like I said, we just came from LAMPS, and we had a very similar problem where we've got lots of these devices that have all very different ways of providing attestation of themselves, attestation of the key. We didn't want to hard code every possible way into the RFC. So what we did is we took what's in section 7 right now and made it an appendix, and then have an IANA registry of all of these different methods. That way you're 100% extensible. You don't have anything in normative text, right? It's only in the example informative text. And then I wrote, people could go check out our hackathon for how to do this for the attestation. So this is already basically proven how we could do it. So that's what I would propose. And we can certainly have that discussion.
Okay. I mean, I think the only issue is what I would just say is we should talk through what is needed for an IANA entry. What I think is needed is a specification, and that covers a handful of things, and we can talk through that.
Yeah, and Hannes is just walking over to IANA to actually discuss what we're doing. It would be the exact same model that we're doing here.
Yeah, the biggest issue that I really need feedback on is versioning of the extensions themselves. We talked about it once. There was a proposal out there. I myself am uncomfortable with it because there are too many versions. It would lead to lots of version strings inside the URN. And so if people have thoughts about that, I think now's the time. Otherwise, my proposal will be just to simplify that through the registration process, just to name if somebody's going to do another version, it should be viewed completely different as the previous extension. It's just a different extension.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of is you don't even need that in the spec. That's their problem to go deal with.
Yes.
Point to them, and then they go deal with it. So you can take that whole bullet and make it just go away. Right. So anyway, it sounds like we're in a violent agreement. Let's talk about it and see if we can line this up. Thanks.
Sounds good. Okay, and just one other comment while if somebody else has anything else to say, it's great. But the other comment would be, I would like to invite anybody who wants to sort of contribute to the open source for this, especially if you want to implement, like I'm in the process of doing some more refactoring on that code, but over the next couple of weeks, it's really going to stabilize nicely. Initially, the code base there was very BLE focused, and I'm trying to just sort of, get that into a way that it's far more compartmentalized, and I think that's in process. But beyond that, in as much as people would like, right, or if you want to implement page pagination or anything else in the open source, we could use coders wanted.
Pam was still in the queue, by the way.
Oh, sorry. I can't see it.
That's okay. So one other thing, have you got a liaison in the FIDO Alliance for FDO? Are you working officially through those two standards bodies, or?
Not officially, but I mean, Jeff and I were spending, I don't know, we were meeting once or twice a week to try and get it done.
Okay, that's great. The only reason I ask is because I believe there's a new coordinator that's been brought on board specifically for onboarding. So I will make that connection if you haven't already connected with them.
Right. And let me just say what we've done so that it's clear, right? What is being passed at this point is an FDO voucher through the SCIM provisioning system. And that then in turn gets passed to the ownership process, the owner process in FDO, so that essentially you don't have to deal with email, which I think is one of the mechanisms that they talk about. And you just hand this thing to the owner process, and Rendezvous continues as Rendezvous did, and all those other things happen as they did. This is just an efficiency step to pass the voucher into the enterprise.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And if there are other objects needed, by the way, now's a really good time to hear that.
Yeah, and I'll be the liaison for the TCG stuff, as well as working on this other stuff. So.
Very good.
So Elliot, did I hear you then request for an early security review? Is that the only review?
Yes.
I think you needed? Okay, so
Yes.
now my next question. It sounded like you were still updating the draft. Should I wait?
Yeah, my suggestion is give it 2 weeks or so. Hopefully by then Monty and I can have had the discussion, and I have a bunch of editorials to update. I want to clean up I want to do one more pass on the security considerations, but I mean, we're passing credentials here. So absolutely, I want a security area review so that we can hear, from people who are horrified by that concept.
Okay, I will wait until I see a new draft posted, or you remind me, and we'll ask for that.
Oh, and I just want to, there is something on this slide I want to comment on. Matter has become quite popular, but in the enterprise, it's not quite there. And so I don't know that Matter will make the cut. It will probably be an extension that we get to as Matter and Enterprise come together a little bit faster.
I'm not sure I understood that comment. Or I mean,
okay, what I meant is I don't think we'll get to Matter in this draft because it's there. We don't know what to provision yet, right? So we don't know what the objects should be, and that's because Matter's enterprise notions haven't matured yet, but they're in the works.
I did not realize that.
I mean, they're fine for consumer, right? It's just for this use case, for where you would probably use SCIM, they may need additional objects for the enterprise. They may not. We don't know yet, and until we do, right, we shouldn't bother trying to just guess an extension, right? Because you actually have to have code behind it, and so we'll do that later.
Okay. Yeah. No, my comment was more it wasn't clear to me that Matter's charter was enterprise. They're very consumer focused.
Yeah, I think they'll stretch for enterprise later is the point.
Got it. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this draft?
And thanks for giving me the extra time.
Well, thank everybody else, and I apologize if I rushed everybody, but it seemed like without slides, things just kind of went quicker. Okay, so when you're ready, we'll do the early review. I'll also look to see, and then I'll look to you, Elliot, to tell me when you think it's mature enough to do, because you mentioned May, right, for working group last call. So I will wait for you to give me that indication. Okay. So we are at the end of our agenda and we are out of time. So I think with that, I will thank everybody. Special thanks to Peter and Paul for taking notes. And we will continue the discussions on the mail list and our ongoing sessions, meetings. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Ned.
Yep.
Thank you, Nancy.